everyone, and welcome back to my doll collecting channel. Today we're going to be talking about a topic that I have been requested to talk about by several of you since I mentioned it in my previous video, which is talking about the rise of the kidult and how brands are adapting to this new demographic. So what I'm going to be talking about in this video is what is a kidult, why is everyone talking about it, and how companies are responding to this new demographic, which is buying toys. Toy collecting and doll collecting specifically is nothing new, but the fear surrounding adults who collect toys and dolls is fairly new. When you search the term kidult, you will see a massive group of YouTube commentators talking about the problem with toy collecting or doll collecting as an adult, very similar to the hate towards Disney adults. So much for living in a free country. But what these commentators fail to mention is that toy collecting, or at least doll collecting, is nothing new. The earliest examples, even though there is few examples from this period, were right after World War II, when people began to have larger incomes and realized that life was short. There are several doll brands that stuck out during the decades, which include Madame Alexander, Barbie, and Cabbage Patch Kids, which have had a large following of collectors. Barbie was released in 1959, and in 1980 was the first Barbie convention for adult collectors of Barbie, meaning that children who had Barbies growing up would be in their 20s during this convention at the earliest. But from my experience, this convention probably had visitors who did not grow up with Barbie, but they still collected them. This proves the idea of adult doll collectors is nothing new and not something that emerged from the pandemic. And this idea that it was a new concept created by the pandemic is false and not formed in reality. Yes, there is an increase of doll collectors due to the global pandemic, but it's not the only reason, and it is definitely not a new phenomenon. Personally, I started collecting American Girls again as an adult during the pandemic, but that was something I wanted to do in secret for years. I always said when I win the lottery or when I make a stupid amount of money, I would collect all the American Girl historicals. However, when you live through a global pandemic, when suddenly people are dying and you're not interacting with judgmental coworkers and classmates on a daily basis, your priorities adjust and you start to think for yourself instead of trying to impress other people, which is what I was trying desperately to do right before the pandemic. But I know that doesn't explain every other or all doll collectors that exist today. So why is suddenly everyone talking about toy collectors, which the media has referred to as kidults? So in an article posted on December 19th, 2022, CNBC posted an article titled, "Adults Are Buying Toys for Themselves, and It's the Biggest Source of Growth in the Industry." The article goes on to state, quote, that these children at heart are responsible for 1/4 of all toy sales annually, around $9 billion worth, and are the biggest driver of growth throughout the industry, according from data from the NPD Group. Which is no surprise if you watch my video on how YouTube saved American Girl. In that video, I highly recommend watching it after this one. It was based on an essay report thing that I wrote for one of my anthropology classes. And in that article, I wrote about how what we thought at the time was the increased stress on children. Children and parents were realizing an increase in stress, so they were buying more toys. And in that paper, I tied it to my own experience when I worked in a toy store. And so what I was witnessing, also with statistical data, which I'm going to talk about now. And I talk about how there's concrete evidence that more toys were bought during the first year of the pandemic, so in 2020. If you go watch that video, How YouTube Saved American Girl, I read the paper to you guys and I explain all of it. So if you want to go check it out, I'll have that linked in the description box below, because it's a very interesting paper that I wrote and one of my favorite papers that I've ever written. So in that video, I talk about how American Girl sales were so low in 2018 and 2019 that people were scared that the iconic brand would go under. But that all changed in 2020. I know we are tired of hearing about the traumatic experience, which is the global pandemic of 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic, but it has fundamentally changed so much in our culture in ways that we don't even know yet. But what we do know is that this led to an increase in toy sales. In May of 2020, after American stimulus checks were released, there was a 38% increase in toy sales in May of 2020. And in October of 2020, there was a 33% increase in toy sales. At first, it was theorized that this was parents buying toys for their children, but new statistics show that it might have been adults who were responsible for this growth in the industry. Now, the stats state that anyone who is over the age of 12 is considered an adult, so that might throw off the numbers depending on your perspective. Personally, I see nothing wrong with being a doll collector as an adult. We claim to be from a society which prioritizes freedom, but then harshly judges when somebody is different from us. As the classic song goes, we are all crabs in a bucket, or the example of tall poppy syndrome. When you start to become successful or deviate from the crowd, you are quickly cut down because people don't want to confront their own insecurities or pitfalls. Because you are demonstrating that you don't care what others think or that you have an excess cash to spend on these things, people are quick to cut you down in order to feel superior merely because they meet the status quo. Because not doing so means they have to generate their own thoughts and feelings to the world around them. The idea of people making fun of kidults, as much as I hate that term purely because it sounds like an oxymoron and also feels like the term itself was created to insult, and that somehow by buying toys we are somehow behaving in other childish ways, which is completely independent from each other. But the idea of making fun of kidults comes with the deep issue in human culture. In elementary school, we are taught that reasons people bully and join bullies is because they think if they join the bully, then the bullying won't happen to them. That the attention is on the other guy and not on them, but this just leads to a desperate scramble of trying to find a new victim, and thus the bullying never ends. This could be an easy problem to fix if people just looked at themselves in the mirror and worked on their insecurities. But nobody wants to do that because that would mean accepting that you are not perfect and that you are flawed. Most people react to their life instead of creating it, and this quote has explained a lot about human psychology and has helped me a lot understand the world around me. Because, let me tell you, it's hard being a 22-year-old and realizing how unnecessarily hurtful people can be. People want a free market capitalist society because it's good for business, yet judge people who buy things that are harmless like toys. And no, buying toys does not take it away from children. There's a surplus of toys and Walmart is always putting them on clearance. So people need to stop with this false idea that collectors are somehow stealing toys from children. It's just illogical when you think about how capitalism works and the surpluses it creates. So we know that adults are buying toys, but the main question is, how are toy companies responding to the new collector demographic? How are companies responding and which ones are the best and doing the worst? Now, these are based on my opinions. I am going to be reacting to some of the actions that doll companies are doing to target the adult collector market. And here's some of my opinions on who's doing the best and who's doing the worst. And these are in no particular order, but I thought I would start off with the email that inspired me to create this whole video from the brand Maple Leaf. Now, I have talked about Maple Leaf dolls a lot on my channel recently and has led to an increase of new subscribers. So hello if you came here for the Maple Leaf content. But for those of you who do not know what Maple Leaf is, make sure to go watch my full in-depth video essay on the brand here on YouTube. Link in the description box below. But for a basic rundown, Maple Leaf Dolls is a high-end 18-inch doll brand from Canada which focuses on Canadian dolls and stories. The majority of the products are made in Canada with the exception of the dolls themselves, which are made in socially responsible factories in China. They have become a fan and collector favorite in the last little while, with an increasing number of people in the doll collector communities talking and discussing about them. The email I received 2 days ago at the recording of this video shows the following. So the email, when you open it up, states the following. Dear fellow doll enthusiasts, it is so wonderful that dolls are being enjoyed at any age. For me, the interest has been lifelong. From sewing and crafting for my dolls as a child to collecting dolls in national costume as I backpacked through Europe after university. Dolls have woven their way through my life in many different ways. For this email, I have gathered together what I think will be of interest to teen and adult Maple Leaf enthusiasts. Whether the doll in your life is for a child, grandchild, or for yourself, I am thrilled to be part of the Maple Leaf community. With kind regards, Catherine Gallagher Morton. Maple Leaf, president and founder. So what I find interesting about this email is when it says, for this email, I have gathered together items I think would be interest of teen and adult Maple Leaf enthusiasts. Now, this is interesting because this goes back to the article from CNBC, where it was talking about the stats are based on people who are 12 and older buying toys, and that's who they defined as an adult. So I have a high sneaking suspicion that the founder of Maple Leaf and the people who worked at Maple Leaf have read that article and is taking the kind of suggested advice, kind of the reading in between the lines of the article, in that people need to target this demographic of people, which is teen and adult collectors. So she's not saying adult collectors, she also included teen, which I found really interesting. Then when you scroll down in the email, you will see this section, which is titled Connecting with Maple Leaf Community. If you would like to share your enjoyment of Maple Leaf with other adults, please consider joining the Maple Leaf Canadian Girl Dolls official fan group. This is a public group on Facebook that we created so fans would have a place to share their photos, stories, and opinions with other fans. And I am also a member of this group on Facebook, and it's pretty good, so if you want to join it, I would highly recommend doing so, because we have a lot of good time there. There you will find a lively and friendly group of people who are posting and commenting regularly. We would love to have you join the conversation and perhaps even post your Maple Leaf photos. And then we have some photos here. Then if you scroll down again, it says doll stands. Display your dolls with pride. Made from Maple Leaf dolls, but will fit all 18-inch dolls and more. Large collection, get a pack of 6 for the price of 5, which definitely I would need a lot of those if I wanted the stands. But and then you scroll down and it's talking about the arrival of 5 new Maple Leaf dolls and Sila, Jenna in new starter outfits, and the return of some new outfits there. So just some general updates. And then it talks about clearance, and then it talks about joining with Ruby Red Fashion Friends. So overall, I think this email is highly interesting. So shortly after the article was released, we get this email directed directly at adult and teen doll collectors. So that is one way Maple Leaf is, connecting with its older fan base. So this demonstrates that smaller brands are even noticing a trend. And from what I've noticed in the Facebook group, I was expecting some children to be in the Facebook group, and that personally would be fine by me, because personally on this YouTube channel, I welcome creators of all ages. So if you're a child watching this, you're definitely welcome to watch my videos. If you're an adult, you're definitely welcome. If you're a teenager, anyone is welcome to watch my YouTube videos, and I hope you enjoy and feel comfortable being here. But in that Facebook group, I don't think I've seen a single child in that group. So it's very interesting. I think there's like 200 members right now, or close to 200 members, and they're all adults. And it's a pretty active group, so I get a lot of attention on my posts that I put in there. So I would have to say that Maple Leaf is one of the better brands for responding to the adult collector demographic. The only thing that I would say is that there's not any special edition collector dolls. They just have their regular line of dolls. So you can kind of make up your own decision of whether or not that's a pro or con, because I think all the doll brands I'm about to list have specific collector dolls. Maple Leaf does not. We'll see if that changes. Who knows? But overall, I think Maple Leaf is doing a better job at targeting their older demographic. Monster High is a very iconic example of targeting adults with their Skull Lecter line of dolls, along with their Boo Original Pre-Production dolls. These dolls are in the style of G1 Monster High, but have a greater detail in the designs and accessories. It was a smart move creating these dolls in the G1 style, because it is what people who grew up with the brand remember, and even though G3 is great in my opinion, I still believe G1 has a soft spot in collectors' heart. I remember watching a TikTok, I know completely unreliable source, but I was watching a TikTok and it was just somebody's opinion. And they were talking about how the Star Wars park in Disney World isn't doing as well as the Harry Potter theme park at Universal. And it is because Star Wars Park, or whatever it's called, focuses on the new trilogy instead of the trilogy that started in the 1970s. Harry Potter World, I don't know. I'm sorry, I should have researched this before I started this video, but the Harry Potter world focuses on more of the nostalgia of millennials who have larger incomes than, well, fans who are children. Now, this TikTok was talking about how much money Disney would make if they focused on the original characters, because it is adults that grew up with the trilogy who have a lot more money and therefore would be willing to spend money on a trip like that. This is kind of what Monster High is doing by focusing kind of on what the older people would want, which is G1, instead of what kids want, which is most likely G3. So ultimately, I think Monster High is one of the best at responding to the adult collector. Now, before we get any further, let's pull out one of the OGs for creating dolls for collectors. It looks like collector dolls for Barbie started in the 1980s according to the Mattel Creations website. And in 1988, the first holiday Barbie was released, which has been a popular collectible ever since. I know so many people who collected Barbie growing up and never batted an eye, it was so common. Sometimes these people wouldn't even call themselves collectors, but they had several dolls for their favorite movies or for the years their children were born. I just wanted to mention this fact since it shows that doll collecting has been around for at least a few decades. Think about it, everybody. The 80s is almost like 50 years ago. I remember seeing a lot of pink label Barbie dolls at Toys R Us, but not so much anymore. Maybe they, like Monster High collectors, have been more popular. Maybe they're just streamlining their products. Who knows? So Barbie's kind of in the middle for, creating dolls for its collector fan base. It was really good before, but I don't know how I feel about it now. In the last few years, American Girl has released many limited edition collector dolls. The most common ones are holiday princess dolls, but there also has been dolls that have been used in auctions that are one-of-a-kind dolls. Once there was the original 6 dolls, so Molly, Samantha, Kirsten, Felicity, Addie, and Josefina. They were all done in modern styles, like by a designer, and they were on eBay as an auction. Then a few times they have worked with Swarovski. Yeah, I can't say that name ever in my life. Crystals. So these dolls were auctioned as well, and I believe one of them sold for like $20,000. So these dolls go for a lot of money. So American Girl, in my opinion, is one of the best if you are interested in the more higher end. And by higher end, I mean really high end, because $20,000 is a lot of money. Rainbow High is a new one on this list, but man, has it been popular in the last couple of years. With the additional designer-inspired outfits and many points of articulation, Rainbow High skyrocketed in popularity almost as soon as it was released. In the United States, definitely not Canada though, but in the United States, collectors felt like the affordable price with such a high-quality doll was a steal, and soon Rainbow High started releasing many collector-focused dolls, such as holiday dolls, a Paris Hilton doll, a costume ball doll line for Halloween, which are all way too expensive for me. I haven't even seen them anywhere in Canada, yet people are finding them on clearance in the United States. Even though it is impossible to tell if Rainbow High's original vision was for collectors, it definitely has become a fan favorite. So I would have to say, while keeping adult collectors in mind, the collector-specific dolls kind of suck. That was my notes. I was like, maybe I'll come up with a better way to word it, but they kind of suck for the collector dolls. But in the general, the regular dolls are pretty good for the price range. So Bratz is trying to bring back their brand, but I'm doubtful on whether or not this will be successful. I have seen so much hype around these dolls and have seen very little information on releases or re-releases, and very few collectors are talking about them online, which is strange since Bratz dominated the market in the early 2000s, giving Barbie a run for her money. But does Bratz really have what it takes to stand out in the crowd of this new world of Monster High and even brands that its own parent company, MGA, has created, such as LOL Surprise, Rainbow, and Shadow High? Personally, I see much hype was around these dolls, and I'm disappointed to see how little people are actually collecting them. I don't really feel like I'm missing out on anything by not collecting these dolls, even though I wasn't allowed to play with them as a kid. Sometimes I wonder if MGA thought it would be a quick buck for a release a few dolls, but didn't plan to execute the plan very well. So Bratz is one of the worst for collecting. Next, we're going to talk about Disney. Now, Disney is interesting. we'll use the word interesting. I wrote down weird, but it's just interesting because there is some super expensive Disney dolls, like the limited edition. I don't even look at them because they're so beautiful, but they're so expensive. And I've heard crazy stories about what you have to do to get them. So you get these big, I think they're like 18-inch dolls or something like that, and they're like $100, and then they sell for crazy amount of money on eBay. And so you have these, on the one end you have these crazy expensive dolls, then on the other hand you have the terrible budget dolls with like the plastic tops of their dresses, and like you can't even change them, and they don't have articulation, and they're just awful. So Disney, I would have to say, is one of the worst for collectors because there's not that much variation. You either spend so much money on these limited dolls and they're hard to get and like almost impossible to get, or you're stuck with these super cheap plasticky dolls. And yes, I heard that Mattel recently got the rights for the princess dolls, but I've heard that they're not that good. So that has been the definition of kidult and how I think different brands in the industry are responding. Do you think I missed any doll lines on this list? Make sure to leave them down below. Make sure to subscribe for more doll news, and also make sure to follow my Instagram. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.